You're listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, MJ. I have to postpone my athlete and profile for the MX515 this episode due to some unforeseen circumstances. But I do have an extended Ohana conversation that I'm sure that you will find both interesting and informative. My Ohana guest today started as a cross-country runner in his home state of Texas as a youngster, and like so many in his era, was turned on to triathlon by watching the Hawaii Ironman on ABC's Wild World of Sports in the early 80s. He had a very successful amateur cycling career, and that turned to ultra cycling, including racing at RAAM 6 times and finishing as high as 4th place there. In one of those races, he became the 7th person to cross the continental USA in under 9 days by bicycle. Along the way, he's held a number of ultra cycling records, including the U.S. 100-kilometer time trial on track and a world record for 24-hour road time trials. In 1999, he finished in 3rd place at Ultraman Canada, behind Ultraman legends Nick Millett and Sergio Cordero. Although he missed going to Kona for Ironman by finishing 1 place at a qualifying twice, he did race the Ultraman there 3 times. When he retired from racing, he started a career in sport photography, and many in this audience will know him for his photos at Ultraman races. Joining me from my favorite Texas city, his hometown, Austin, Texas, it's birthday boy, Rick Kent. Happy birthday, Rick.
Happy birthday. Yeah. I turned 39, by the way, yesterday.
Oh, 39 again, huh?
Yes, again. That's right.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Few people will get that joke, but we'll see if they can find out.
All right. Being that you're in Austin, and I believe you to be somewhat of a music guy, I want to start off with a music question for you. And that is, what's your best Austin City Limits experience?
Well, I went to Austin City Limits just 2 nights ago to see Steve Miller, just by chance.
Oh, okay.
So it's great that you asked that question. And there's also ACL, the festival.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the very first, it might have been the second one I think they had. Maybe the first I saw Al Green. So he was definitely my best,
wow.
Austin City Limits festival. The best ACL live, at the movie theater, it was definitely a couple nights ago seeing Steve Miller.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And what about the South by Southwest Festival? Is that another one that you check out?
South by Southwest has developed into something Austinites don't like. We don't go anywhere near it. It's I went to the first South by Southwest out at South Park Meadows. It wasn't anything remotely like what it is now. Mm-hmm. It was a few concerts. Now it's this media, $1,500 or more to get in. So we Austinites kind of avoid it.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's grown into quite a big thing. It's like a technology conference now, and movies and music and all kinds of stuff, right?
Well, I believe it's the second most, has the second biggest impact on our economy here. Our economy. It's like, I want to say 3 weeks, maybe 2.5. But there's content creation, and towards, it's the last part, of course, is music, which it just used to be music. And
right.
To get into the different venues for concerts, and there's been every major act, 99% of the major acts, except for like the Rolling Stones, people like that. Mm-hmm. Like Billie Eilish played her in her earliest parts of her career to a tiny, tiny venue.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I mean, I'm a fan, so I would like to see that. And the Yeahs and these groups that they're huge now.
Yeah.
And I like music of all types.
Have you had any brushes with greatness in Austin? Like, you ever just come across a musician in a coffee shop or something?
Yes, I have. Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother, Jimmy Vaughn. Okay, let me tell you this story about one of my favorite blues players. Anyway, this guy that used to sponsor me, Champion Nutrition, emails me, and this was after a whole year of him telling me I could back up the truck and get anything from Champion Nutrition. You know, they had Sodomax and all this stuff and bars, and I wasn't of the ilk of the athletes. They were more into triathletes, a few cyclists, nationals, mostly mountain bikers. But I'm just, I used to go to the bike shows every year in Anaheim, and then they started having in Las Vegas. And I talked. He said, because I sent him my resume several times. This is back when it was all faxes, and he got me over there. He said, "Good to see you, Rick. I'm so sorry I didn't. It took me so long to reply last year to your proposal, because they started sending me a little bit of stuff." He said, "I'm going to make up for it, though. I want to." His name was Jeff Montgomery. He's a great guy. We call him Iron. Pretend there's a truck you can just back up to our warehouse. Just send me an email or fax me what you want, okay? And I'm like, this is great, but there's something to this. I got a fax from him that said, "Do you know Jimmy Vaughn?" I'm like, okay, here it comes. Something's, this is what he wants. "You know Jimmy Vaughn?" I said, "Sure." I never met the guy in my life. That's me though. I'm a sales guy. Well, could you somehow get his new CD autographed and send that to me? Just the paper part. He had just come out that day. Mm-hmm. So I'll say it's done. It's considered done. So what I did, he lives next door. Like, he used to live real close to here. He got divorced and he sold his house. But he lived next door to my earliest bike mechanic. I went over to his house and I said, "Listen, I got something I need to do. You got to help me out. How well do you know Jimmy?" He goes, "Oh, I see him all the time." "Well, I want your advice on how I can get him to autograph. Like, I don't want to just walk up to his house. That's silly. I want your advice on how I can get this CD cover autographed by him." Well, what I did was I went beyond that. I got the CD, but then I had it blown up like a square, like this big.
Right, like a poster size.
Based on Kevin's advice, my friend, I was working at Dell at the time. I got a Dell envelope, a huge, and I had two of them, and I put that picture and then a self-addressed envelope to my friend in California. I said, a couple of short paragraphs. I explained his number one fan is out in California, San Diego, or wherever, and I want you to write to my number one fan, Iron Montgomery or Jeff Iron Montgomery, and then sign it, right? Well, he did it, and it was there quick, within a week, right? And he called me. He was stunned, right? I don't want to make this story too long, but I could have kept going getting that sponsorship forever, but yeah.
Well, let's start off by maybe it's one of the more painful parts of your athletic career. I mentioned it in the beginning. You like many cyclists of your day were riding, and you got turned on to the Ironman because you saw it on the wide world of sports. And in those early days before the Ironman circuit existed, they had some different qualifying ways of qualifying. And you being a sub 3 hour marathoner and a high level cyclist, you figured you had it. You could have got, sorry, how much?
250.
250. All right. So you figure you kind of had a good line on getting into it based on what they were doing at that time. Can you tell us a little bit about, because many people don't know how the qualifiers happened before this whole circuit. Tell us what was it that was going on then, and why you thought you were going to get in without the qualifier.
Right. In the very early days, you could just enter it and get in, right? They had 25 or whatever. And of course, because it got so much TV coverage, that's what did it with the TV coverage. Yeah. You had all these people wanting to be on TV, and a lot of them had legitimate chances of winning because the ABC Wilder Sports, and it was like the ultimate challenge at the time because everybody was doing marathons. I'd already done 20 marathons, maybe even 25. By then, I was obsessed with the marathon distance. I was still in college then. So you have to send off a request for an application. Or actually, I said, I want to register this year. Well, I didn't know it was too late. So they sent me an application for the next year. To qualify and be accepted, you had to do 2 of 3 things. You had to be a sub 250 marathoner, which is the time you can qualify to get into the Boston Marathon. So that made sense. So that's in my mind and everybody's mind, that's a pretty elite time. But I'd already spent, years getting
to that point. You had that.
I looked at it as many, many years, but I'd only started running in 78. Now we're talking 80. I sent that application in late 81. I got that notice from them in 82. Mm. And so either be a 250 marathoner or be a Cat 3 cyclist in the national governing body, the United States Cycling Federation, which is now USA Cycling. Mm-hmm. And they only had 4 categories, but now they have 5. So if you became a Cat 3 cyclist, which meant you had at least 1 year of experience, and hey, you probably had placed in a couple of races, 6th or better. Mm-hmm. Well, you had to do top 3 in 3 races that first year, or top 6 in 6 races. So for someone like me that had a strong endurance background, cycling, doing well in cycling came pretty easy. Mm-hmm. So it took me like 4 months for both me and my friend that I was entering cycling world with. We both could qualify or to be a Cat 3, which was a big deal. Mm. I mean, I'm new to all this, sports, doing 10Ks and marathons. And
right.
So we got upgraded. I remember how big of a deal. We went to the district rep's house, and he's just, he already knew us. Okay, so I send him my app for the Ironman with my $100 that a sponsor gave me, this owner of a bar in San Marcos, and I laugh because, getting sponsors was such a big deal at first, to get anything free or get especially money. So that might have been my first ever money, like actual cash. I'm just now realizing that. So then it sent me a letter back saying we changed our qualifying. You have to do these different races, and you have to, depending on each race was different. You had to either win it overall, like that was only one qualifying spot for one male and one female, or do these other races and get in the top 3 in your age group. Like the one I almost qualified was in Kentucky, and then the other one I almost qualified in Dallas. Those were bigger events, so just getting top 3 in the age group.
And you came 4th in both of those.
Yes, in my age group. So I might as well have gotten 20th. You know what I mean? So, but the fourth places, in both events, I was there was a spread between third and fourth in both those events.
Mm.
So, I'm going to do it next year. So, but I was so disappointed because the rug was pulled out from under me on getting in the Ironman.
Yeah.
I never got an Ironman, but I continued to try for 4 more years. Mm-hmm. But after 2 more years, after I got to, I think it was 86, it was pretty much you can tell so many people were getting into the triathlon, especially so many swimmers.
Mm-hmm.
I never developed swimming as a talent.
Mm-hmm.
I had my hands full with cycling and running. I was really just a runner too. I became a good cyclist, not a great cyclist. It took me several more years until I started to realize I was getting good because I was staying up with the top guys, like, on training rides. I'd be one of the sprinters for sprinting for signs.
Right.
And
you ended up as a pretty high-end amateur cyclist when it comes to racing.
I was a Cat 2, Category 2.
Mm-hmm.
Category 1 is national team level. Right. Category 2 is, you're the top of your region. Right. But different regions were different. If you were in Colorado and you were 2, that was a lot better than being a Category 2 somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
We had a huge base of cycling in Texas, especially Houston and Dallas, but these are flat areas.
So other than RAAM, which we'll get into in a little bit, what are some of the other more prestigious or, famous events maybe that you've raced in your cycling circuit that you're proud of and that you enjoyed?
My favorite biking event was my last professional event, which was it was called the Giro d'Italia Una Tappa, which means Circle of Italy in one stage. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to the Giro d'Italia, everybody knows about, that's a stage race. So they invited me and they invited this French guy named Dominique Colliard, who anybody that I raced against, like Dominique, in RAAM and all these, I became great friends. It's just but he won. I said I would finish the event. I said the winner would finish in 72 hours. And Dominic finished in 72 hours. I was 3 hours after him. It rained incessantly, and it was so brutal. There was over 100,000 feet climbing, probably way more than that. And then the rain, and the climbs weren't generally long, steep climbs. They were just very steep, short climbs. I remember going through San Marino. It was raining, and by the time we were all alone. All of the cyclists were generally by themselves with their crew, suffering through this mess. I found out during the race that some of the people in the back were just holding on to their support vehicles and, pretty much doing that. That's not uncommon in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
But when I finished, before the race and after the race, I got a lot of media, video cameras and interviews, and I always had to have an interpreter. They always had the interpreter next to me. And the night before the race, there was this, they call them chat shows. But what it turned out to be was me and this Italian woman that was like the ultra hero of ultra cycling in Italy. And they don't really have ultra cycling. I never heard of her. Right. But it was funny. They just had me and her. They should have had Dominique come out there too.
Right. Yeah.
And it was because I was American. That's all that was.
Yeah.
Recant the American hero. I heard that a lot over there. Here's the biggest part of that event that it affected me. I finished in second place, 3 hours behind Dominique, but they waited to have the press conference until Rick Kent, the American Hero, finishes. So Dominic had to hang around,
Yeah.
So I did that, and I have all the pictures on Facebook from that, me holding up my trophy, and the interpreter's next to me, and they're asking me questions, and the professional photographer they had was very good. So I have pictures from it.
Right.
But after that race, it would be a triathlon called Iron Alps. That Dominique, that guy that beat me, he sent me an invitation. He was the race director for that. That was from Grenoble, France to Turin, Italy. That was so it was in 4 stages, but it was just an Ultraman. Jane Bacchus, Ultraman owner in Hawaii. She and Dominic had it set up to where that was going to be Ultraman Europe. But kind of towards the last couple of months, some kind of thing. I don't think he had the proper insurance or something. But she yanked that whole deal.
Right. Okay.
And so he changed to Iron Alps, which I didn't care. But I got to on the third stage, was a 185 mile bike. I got to go over the Galibier and the Telegraph, which at the time didn't mean that much to me. I just, I would lead the whole way after the first climb. Went up this climb for 10 kilometers, really steep. And Eric Seedhouse, he had won the Defi. It's called, that's his nickname, the Defi. It's in Grenoble, the hometown of the race director. It's a triple continuous Ironman. And that's a very, very serious endeavor. You get to the bike and you're reduced to walking within 10 or 20 miles. And if you try to run, you're going to collapse and you're going to be in the hospital. Dominic won the first 2, or the first one. And then he invited, he got Eric invited, or Eric was there. And Eric won by a nice wide margin. But then he won Iron Alps overall. I won stage 2 or 3, and I still have that course record. That's the only big course record I have to this day that I would, kind of say I'll be proud of.
Yeah.
And I had of course Brest Paris in 2003. I was hired to do that event to support this woman, this wealthy woman, and pace her the whole way. It's got like 5,000 people. It's like the Olympics of the touring amateur cycling.
Okay.
Of ultra cycling.
Yeah. They
have 14 control stations. You have to get this thing like a credit card where they can record your time and location. And which we call it PBP. PBP is a very very important event in cycling in Europe. Over here too. I mean, the most entries are from, there's 500 of those 5,000 are from America.
And that's like 1,200 kilometers?
1,200 kilometers, 750 miles. It's more commonly referred to as 1,200 kilometers. But to qualify, it's kind of a pain. You have to do a 200 kilometer, a 300 kilometer, a 400 kilometer, which now you're 400 kilometers, 250 miles. So, and then 600 kilometer. You have to go to certain events called brevets in the randonneuring. It's around this world of randonneuring rides, brevet rides. All those rides, with my credentials, I mean, come on, they won't waive guys like me or any elite RAAM guy. Like if you've done RAAM, that doesn't matter to them at all.
Yeah.
But what it's doing, though, I suppose, it's showing that you can be self-supported because there's no crew. There's no. I suppose kind of have a crew by having them at every checkpoint. But no cars can be on the course.
Right.
And at the last minute, the woman that was sponsoring me, it came out to be a little over $5,000, all the expenses, and I wasn't charging her fee at all. She was a prior friend from Houston. I was living and working in Austin by then, working at Apple. I jumped at the chance to get her support, at no cost to me. But then we did the brevets that we did to get in were all condensed into an 8-day period, which most people would consider that quite a challenge.
Yeah.
It's not really. So 200 kilometers the first day, the next day, 300 kilometers, 2-day break, you do 400, and then a 3-day break, you do the 600. And it's in Wisconsin in the summertime, 2 months before PvP, but the woman decided that I wasn't a good pacer. I mean, we didn't gel mentally. Mm-hmm. At that brevet week, I treated it like training for her. So I paced her all the time. But at one point, it came to where she said, "Don't go so fast. Rick, you need to slow down a little bit."
Yeah.
But this is a very fit woman.
Right.
Her name is Ann Bond. And this is a very seriously good and very, very determined mentally woman. But she decided she wanted to change to Bob Forney, who was one of my mentors in RAAM. Mm. So I got to do PvP, but not supported. I would never dream of doing anything unsupported. Mm. I mean, I'm Rick Kinthy, the American hero. No, but not really. I was just used to having a crew, right, and having it very professional. I just ended up doing this ride unsupported, and it was a very fulfilling experience. And so I'm very lucky that Ann sought me out, even though we didn't end up together doing it. So what was your next question?
Well, I just want to talk a little bit about how you are more experienced with these supported races by doing RAAM. At that time, you're doing RAAM quite a bit. You had 6 attempts at RAAM. You completed 5 of them. You finished as high as 4th place in 1992. What first got you into doing RAAM? How did you get into that world?
There's a very simple answer to that. I was the events or any kind of tour rides that were like century rides or double century rides or double metric century, like 125 miles, 200 kilometers. Whenever I got to, I only did one that was 200 miles, but I always was first or with a group that was first, and I always had plenty of energy. So I started figuring out that it came to a point where I would get everybody else would get all of a sudden exhausted, brain dead, tired. When I didn't do that, as a matter of fact, I got stronger. Mm-hmm. It was like I was taking their energy away. That's a really good way I could describe it. Mm-hmm. By them showing weakness, I just got stronger, and I could easily finish 200 miles at a very, very honest pace. Mm. But it took about less than 2 years of that, really more like a year. And then I did the Spenco 500 in Waco, which was 500 miles. Now you're not flipping tiddlywinks. You've got to be prepared. Right. It was a 25-mile loop, 1988. By then I was sponsored, working for this bike shop in Houston called Spenco, and they were like a sugar daddy sponsor. I couldn't believe how much I was sponsored. I would get $1,000 a month, tax free after taxes, for working 14 hours a week in the bike shop. So they had me there. I was already becoming known as this ultra cyclist that was going to do RAAM. You know, doing that. I won this 185-mile thing from Houston to Austin, point to point, from the city hall in Houston to the Capitol. And I won it by like 2 hours, or a wide margin. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't get off the bike though. You know, I knew going into that, based on some stories I read in the Race Across America and they're in the Tour de France too. They keep you on the bike, but except for a flat, I was on the bike the whole ride, and you know everybody else was stopping and massaging their feet. I mean, come on. So I was developing the mental attitude of what it took to succeed in ultra racing. And then I did the next year I did the Spenco 500. I was given 11th, and then they discovered, quite a few people let me know, hey, they made a mistake. You know, they gave me ninth place money, but it should have gone to you. I was upset because they published the top 10, in winning, and it's Velo News, and I was 11th, so I didn't care about the money at all. It was getting the recognition for sponsors,
right? Yeah.
And then they asked me if I was going to do RAAM interview, finish line, Spenco. Yeah, I was actually already considering it.
Okay.
Before that, I mean. But it was funny how I was doing this interview, literally sitting at the finish line. Yeah. They pulled up a chair, and the guy, and they were doing that for everybody.
Yeah.
But this guy I knew, he was from Austin. And then I had to qualify for RAAM, which was another 520 mile something in the Mojave Desert, and that was the Spenco 500 was on that 25-mile loop. But then I'm going to do this 500-mile ride, which was later called Furnace Creek 500. At that time, it was called RAAM Open West. But I got third, which surprised everybody. I didn't have any. Well, I should say I actually had the Spenco 500 in my belt, but it was my resume. I had all this national track record, and it made me sound better than I was. Mm. I mean, 100-kilometer track records aren't the same as 508 miles in the desert in the heat. Right. It was so hot. It was so hot. And I had my mother as my crew, my mother, who didn't know anything. Yeah. At the last minute, somebody else jumped in, a very experienced ultra crew guy. Yeah. And then, as luck would have it, this girl, Cindy Steiger, who had won the previous RAAM, she had a broken collarbone or something. No. Anyway, she became part of my crew, and she had her own van. So I had two vans. Cindy Steiger, who became the crew chief. So now I'm getting a taste of a good crew. And
this is in the Furnace 508.
Furnace Creek 508. Yeah. Well, it was called the RAAM Open West. Yeah. And I got third, and at this climb called Towns Pass. Yep. Which is like 200 miles. That's the horrible.
Same one they use in Badwater.
Well, Badwater is the same race director.
Right.
I don't know. It could be. Chris Kosman is the race director. Right. He wasn't the race director of qualifying race then, but he bought it from John Marino, and then he changed the name to Furnace Creek 508.
Right.
I'm impressed that you knew about that, about the Badwater, because there's a strong correlation between the two events.
Right.
They don't have Furnace Creek 508 anymore. They moved it to Nevada. But when it came to that climb, my USCF legs, my strong USC Cat 2 legs came into play. I was towards the rear of the field. I'd actually gotten off course like by 15 miles. My mother sent me off in the wrong direction. But I was coming back, and I got to the bottom of that climb. And I remember I had a 4224 as my big gear with 700C wheels, which later I would use for a smaller road bike. And I went by everybody except the leader. I was in second place. And the only reason I didn't stay in second place was I stopped and I had problems. I was having, I couldn't stay awake. So I collapsed in the middle of the road. My mother was freaked out. Cindy Starver was up the road somewhere. So that, I think I wasted 20 or 25 minutes on that. And like I tell you, you got to stay on the bike. So I ended up getting third. And but the most important thing was I had the conditions, race conditions of RAAM. The same rules. You had to have a van only so wide. You where you can get fed from the van. I'd never done that before. In Spenco 500, they had this rule. They had to give you, whatever your nutrition was from the side of the road. No hand-ups from the vehicle.
Ultraman style.
Yeah. So after doing that race, I had a lot of confidence going into RAAM.
Well, let me just ask you a question then. So, by doing this race, you figured out that you had a problem with the sleeping or falling asleep, I guess, and things like that. And you're going to go in and do RAAM, which is multi-days. What kind of tips can you give for people that are now considering doing RAAM, being that you've completed it 5 times, particularly along those lines of sleeping and nutrition, because those are the two things that, that really play a factor in this race compared to any other. So obviously you learned something about the sleeping and maybe you follow tips from someone else. So what can you pass on to people that are looking at doing it now?
Well, I just used the same recipe as Pete Sears, who was our ultimate hero. He won in '86. He was the first to use aero bars and liquid nutrition. As a matter of fact, a company called this product was called Ultra Energy. I think the name of the company, it's not important, but they had the formula was finalized in Japan, and they used some special expensive amino acids. It made it so expensive. So I went into RAAM with doing everything exactly like Pete Sears. I knew I wasn't able to go that fast because he set the national world record crossing record. At that time, it was like 8 days, 3 hours or something like that. He averaged 14.5 miles an hour, including everything, sleep, stops. So I used his sleep plan, which was an hour and a half a day, but he didn't get any sleep the first day. He went all the way into deep into the second day, and he went down for his 90 minutes. Now, that never seemed like I just accepted it. That's what Pete did. That's how you do well in RAAM. My plan was to do RAAM at least 10 times. My plan was to do RAAM 10 times. As long as I can keep sponsoring. So I thought, well, the first 2 RAAMs I do, especially the first one, it's all going to be about learning what's possible for me. So I used liquid nutrition. I used Ultra Energy. We call it UE. So now, okay, so that's my simple plan. I got the liquid nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
I got a fantastic crew. Cindy Starr was the crew chief, but not at first. I had a crew chief from Houston. His name was Mike Gladue. Mike was a very important element in my success. He knew all of this stuff about mechanics, but he started out as my crew chief. But then Cindy joined in, and Cindy, let me tell you, she's pretty forceful. She's the leader, kind of a gal.
And is that part of the reasons for your success as well? Is the crew that's part of it, and having that good crew chief?
My father had just died, unfortunately, and I signed over any assets that my dad left me, the money, to my mother, and then my mother used that money for me doing RAAM. We spent way too much. I had 21 crew members. Which weren't for the whole crossing. I had 13 that were actively crewing for me the whole crossing, and a motorhome, which is completely unnecessary. And it's just too much to manage all those people.
Right.
I had totally 5 vehicles, including my motorhome. So I learned right away that not to use a motorhome, use motels.
Less is more?
Keep it simple. KISS. The KISS formula.
Yeah. I would like to take a short break here in my conversation with Rick to speak with you, my listener. Thank you for taking the time to listen to 515 and for subscribing. You may have seen on the Facebook page recently that people from 64 different countries listen to this podcast. That number is actually now 65, and it breaks down to 890 different cities. If you appreciate the content I am presenting and enjoy listening to 515, please help me to spread the word. Share my Instagram or Facebook posts and tag a few of your friends that you feel would also like the show. Most listeners are already a part of the Ohana, so let's reach out to some of those Ironman athletes out there. I can't wait till my podcast hits 1,000 cities around the world. You can help me to do that. Thank you for listening. Let's get back to my conversation with Rick about RAAM. I guess what you're saying is that liquid nutrition was good for you in ultras. Having a great crew was really important to you. And for, in particular, doing the RAAM race, the 90 minutes of sleep per day was kind of like a great number to use and work off of from there. Now, obviously, every athlete's going to be slightly different, but it's nice to have a little formula to work off of and try, and then other athletes would be able to test with that and see how it works out for them.
Well, mastering the 90 minutes a day off the bike, which is the only time, and mastering nothing but liquid, I had no trouble going all liquid. That was never an issue with me. Mm-hmm. It is for a lot of people, though. The 90 minutes is something that took me until 92. 93, I almost had it down, but records show, that I, is like a couple extra hours or maybe even 3. I have all those records to this day. Mm-hmm. But 92, I came within an hour and a half of the 90 minutes only, Mm-hmm. But most all people never can even get under 3 hours, which is totally understandable.
Right.
It's you've got to have a lot of confidence in your pacing, your athletic ability, your fitness, and all that to do the 90 minutes.
Did you have any near misses out there on the course due to fatigue or anything?
I had a lot. I got, hallucinations And in my first year, I had a mental breakdown. Depression was part of that severity. The mental, bizarreness you go through, every rider has it happen. Those are things that if you don't pace yourself, if you don't keep liquid or your nutrition balanced, balancing your nutrition and your water intake is something that's not hard to do, but you got to, if you're an elite guy trying to do, you got to really balance it to the finest of percentages.
And now, as you go from one year to the next, and you start to know about this stuff, are you able to recognize in the time that, oh, I'm irritated or I'm depressed, and this is part of the race, and I recognize it, and I'll push through mentally? Or do you need someone else to say it to you, or do you just not even realize it because it's part of what's going on?
Well, you're riding the bike, but you're not controlling the ride. Your crew chief is, your crew. In my case, it was my girlfriend Annette, who was, no question, one of the best crew chiefs of all time. Highly intelligent woman, from South Africa. They straight A's all through, until law school. I mean, she was just highly intelligent and knew me inside and out, knew all my strengths and weaknesses, what to say and how to say it. What happened to me was there were early signs of problems happening over maybe the next 2 to 3 hours. They're signs. You can be completely happy and lucid and riding fast, but you do start to hallucinate way, way, way before there's, you can hallucinate to be riding fast and good. I remember what would happen to me, and this is 92. I would see rose petals, not red rose petals, but the outline of rose petals on the asphalt, like I was riding over roses petals, and I could close my eyes and look away and look right down, on my airboard, and there they are, man. There's nothing I can do about it. It was kind of funny because it happened so many times, not just that one day. And it started in Tyler, Texas. So because it's the rose capital, I think that's what put roses in my head.
The way the brain works.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to some of your Ultraman races, because then obviously you're taking everything you learned in RAAM, and Ultraman's going to be a walk in the park compared to that for you.
That's correct.
You did three in Hawaii and one in Canada, where I said in the intro you got third place behind Nick and Sergio. But you have a day 2 bike record set in that race. So obviously you're bringing in some strength. That's been beaten, but at that time you had a day 2 bike record.
Right. But the Ultraman race that I had, the most challenges was the one in Europe. It was going to be Ultraman Europe.
Right.
But they added a prologue stage, which was a uphill bike for 4 kilometers. None of us had mountain bikes. They just let us use borrowed bikes. I mean, by the time I got to Hawaii, I'd already done that one in Europe, in France. I went from Grenoble, France to Turin, Italy. The old marathon run was on 10-kilometer loops in a park in Italy, Turin, Italy. Torino, Turin, some people call it different things. But when I got to Hawaii.
Now, how was that run?
I never trained for it. I just did, marathons, and I never changed any of my running training. I just, did I did a lot of 20-milers, but that was all the time. Anybody that wanted to do a 20-miler, they knew they can call Rick Kent. Now we're doing the next day. I mean, a 52-mile run, no matter what, you have to approach that with caution. But based on my experiences in ultra cycling, and doing ultra, and doing it very well, I just knew to start slow and taper off. That's what I called it. Start slow and taper off. What you do, if you use my formula, and a lot of people have when you Ultraman, but you just start painfully slow. Like you can be in last place for a little while, but then you just your body and your mind tells it's just intuition. You know to speed up. Instead of doing 10.5-minute miles, you're getting to where you're doing 10-minute miles, then 9:30. Then you get to halfway, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
My per mile had improved over a minute. And then a couple of miles after the halfway, I start speeding up. And that's where the critical part is when you speed up, you pace yourself, then you start feeling real good until you speed up to where you feel like you're going 6.5 or 7, but you're going like 8.5.
Yeah,
8.5. Like because it's just like RAAM going these slower speeds. You feels like 17, and RAAM feels like 25. 17 is a good club. Right. I don't think I ever went under 8 at the Ultraman run. All those runs, but man, it felt good to pass people. Once again, you take energy away from people when you pass them.
Yeah. So
getting more energy from that.
Right.
Seriously.
Yeah.
They talk about that. The pros talk about that in Ironman.
Yeah.
When you pass people, you take energy.
Oh yeah.
So
well, I'm guessing that you would probably, at the age of 37, still be competing if you weren't forced out of Sports. Can you tell
30, us? I think you meant 39.
Oh, 39. Sorry, 39, right?
Yeah. By the way, everyone, I think everybody knows I'm not 30. That's a Jack Benny thing. I'm 66 as of last night. Yeah.
66. All right. Well,
so,
happy birthday.
With all my life and the way things happened, yeah. I'm kind of more like a 55 or 50-year-old in my attitude, spirit, and everything. It's just that having MS is
right. And maybe just tell us a little bit about when you found out about your MS and being forced to retire from your love of riding and stuff like that. How was that? How long did it take to get over that, and have you got over that?
Well, I had the first very serious MS complications in RAAM, my last year in RAAM 94. But I had no idea it was from MS. I didn't, RAAM, you're doing RAAM, for God's sakes, the stuff happens.
Right.
But fast forward to like year 2000, I'd be on runs with my running mate at the time. I was their training partner for Sundays. It was this woman, Cindy Slater, and she was, it was one of those deals where I felt very, very good about it. I was like pacing this woman to go a little bit faster, maybe, and have her, by doing that, she'd improve. Very good runner. It wasn't like I had to hold her hand, but it got to where Cindy was running. I was struggling to stay with her.
Yeah.
Something was wrong. We would be running on a level concrete sidewalk. The only thing you'd have, cracks in the sidewalk about it. But I would trip as if there was a root, like we were on the trail and there was a big root, and I would drag my right foot and almost fall down. I don't remember ever actually falling down. But that was, then I started consistently, and this is 6 years after that RAAM problem. It was where my right leg, my legs weren't synchronizing.
Right.
Right. And and because I had drank so much Mountain Dew, which had a lot of caffeine. Caffeine has a horrible effect on my balance.
Mm.
Okay, so my runs with Cindy, and then it developed quickly where I was having more and more issues. Till finally I was in Toastmasters, Apple computer, working at Apple. We had a Toastmasters group, and I was on my 10th speech, and I collapsed in a chair while I was giving the speech. At first my head was starting to do this like I had Parkinson's, and my whole body was like a noodle. And so finally, I asked them if I could just take just a tiny break.
Right.
It was only, 6 people in the room. We all knew each other. But as they got the chair for me to sit in, I collapsed into the chair.
Mm.
It was a scary thing for them to see.
Yeah.
But all I had to do was sit down. But they were in the process of calling an ambulance and all that. But so that forced me to go to the doctor.
Right.
And in a short order, I found out I had MS. It usually takes more than a year to actually find out you have that, because there's so much testing, and it could be other things.
Right.
To answer your question.
Yeah, but so being an elite athlete and then getting this diagnosis, how do you come to terms with that it's ending for you?
Well, you make it sound like I discovered I had MS and I was cratered. It was nothing like that at all.
Yeah.
I discovered my neurologist did an MRI. Then because of that, they did a lumbar puncture, spinal tap, and then that confirmed I had a 99.9% chance. I had MS. So then I'm being told I have MS, and it's like your life flashes before your eyes for a couple of seconds, and then I thought, I'm even more special now than I was before, and I was already special. There was maybe 10 people in the world that had my gifted talents, to ride that fast and for that long.
Mm-hmm.
There's other people that can ride a lot slower. So it really it showed how I had developed such a positive attitude. I found humor in it. I found a way to get around it. I was never upset, never upset.
But were you prepared to walk away from the sports, or like at that level?
No, I had already, by that time, it was 2001, and I had already, I had an experience in Ultraman in 2000 where in the run portion, early on in the run, I was starting to have coordination issues where I couldn't keep up. And it was like I was tripping, or
Yeah.
The faster I went, the more I was likely to trip. That wasn't a good experience for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know I had MS. Well, no, I didn't have it. I didn't have MS yet, or I didn't know it. But I ended up having to drop out of that run. I'm not a quitter, but it wasn't. I didn't have any options.
Yeah.
On a downhill, right at about the half marathon part, which incidentally was one of my best shot locations on that run, photographing towards, getting the runners down this hill. I was running down that same hill, and by the time I got to the bottom, and the crew said I should quit at the top of that hill. I said no, and I was just trying to find a way to keep in the race. No, I'm going to go. I'm going to go see if I can make it to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of trouble just getting to the bottom. And I had plenty of energy. It wasn't like I was.
Yeah.
That was probably the hardest thing I ever had to deal with, was being made aware that I was coming to the peak of my athletics, my ultra, whatever athletics, whatever, all that stuff was.
Well, that's interesting that you were like literally coming down the hill when you struck in your own mind that, okay, I'm on the down slope of this career. Like you that's when it clued in for you.
Well, and then I had to, they drove me into the finish, and I had my uniform on, and I got lots of pictures from that, talking to Jane, the race director, and friends. By that time, everybody's my friend. Ultraman's got a tight, that Ohana thing we were talking about, in 3 years, you get to know everybody. And all the people from the island. And so, the finish is at that old airport park. And, but I remember it was such a different, completely unknown experience and it was uncomfortable of me being there, and there's people on the course.
Right.
And I'm not in the race, the winter hasn't come in. This is only like probably 3.5 hours into the event, So I that whole day was not good.
Yeah. When you have that day where it comes to an end for you, when you're not expecting it. Yeah.
And I didn't know it was a complete end.
Right.
I just knew there was a beginning of some process for me.
Well, as you found out about the MS, at that time you kind of decided to pivot and to learn to take sports photos, so that you're still in this life of the sports. You've worked at the New York City Marathon now. You've done tons of Ultraman races, and even at the Ironman World Championship. So how did it come to happen that you turned into this photographer after this career?
That's a great question. It's a good story, but I got to keep it short. I did this race in Austin, this run every year called the 3M half marathon. I did it every year. Everybody did. It's just, one of those runs locally, and this guy, Jay Sutherland, who was the professional photographer, the owner of the professional photography company, who's doing the official photos. 3 years in a row, Jay would give me his business card. Okay, why in the hell is this guy giving me his business card? Me, a photographer. And I told him the third time, I said, Jay, I don't even have a camera. He goes, it doesn't matter. I took his card the third time and said Bright Room. It's not the company. 2-3 months go by, and it was June by then. Emailed him, Jay, let's talk about me being a photographer. And he I forget the words. He was so excited that I emailed. He said, Rick, all you need to do is, we don't have to continue these, just show up 6 a.m. at Decker Lake, this lake in Austin, where they have Danskin Triathlon. He said, you're going to be one of our photographers at Danskin, but all you'll do is, I'm going to put a camera in your hand, and you don't have to be responsible for taking a bunch of pictures, but I want you to follow me around,
Yeah.
and you'll be loading my film at the finish, and I'll teach you how to take a few photos. I've never seen any of my photos from that to this day. But so I was part of that process and being part of the team, photography team. And I was in. I went home that day and bought a bunch of like $6,000 worth of camera equipment. And so, and then by a month later, I had 4 lenses, and I had already I had assignments every weekend after that. And so,
and how is it that he knew that you were going to make a great photographer?
He had no idea. That had nothing to do with why he wanted me. He wanted to use me for my connections. He wanted to use me because I was very popular with all the race directors. All the race directors wanted to talk to me and hang out with me, at the Houston Marathon and all these different runs. And since everybody knew me, he called it good PR. Everything was good PR, where you know somebody or you can interact with somebody. It was like, they were on your Rolodex kind of thing,
Yeah.
And I didn't know that answer to that question until a year later. So Jay, I've always wondered what's the deal? Why don't you say you're going to put a camera in my hand and make me, but I didn't know I was going to get, no, I did. I knew that once I did that first race, there's nothing I don't go full 100% out, go all out.
Yeah.
So once I became a photographer, I wanted to be the best photographer of anybody.
What's been your favorite event that you've worked at as a photographer?
The New York Marathon definitely is my favorite. I did that one 9 times on the photo bridge, which is where all the best guys. I could also make an argument. Where do you think you
take your best photos? What's the most scenic?
The Ironman in Hawaii.
Yeah,
no question. Because the best photo assignment location where I am second to none is the bike 1 mile past the airport when they're headed out. They're in packs. It's illegal to draft, but you can't do anything about it. There's just so many fast people, and they're in these packs. And I was able to, I used a certain lens with a certain extender at first it was with the monopod, then the second year I developed it on with the gimbal, tripod on a gimbal. So your camera is floating. You can just,
right.
And I would hold the camera from the front of the lens extender, lens hood, and do it a certain way. But I had the very rare ability to able to shoot like 3 or 4 people, different people, and frame them center perfect per second. I mean, let me tell you something. You're doing this, and it takes a lot of energy and focus to keep doing that. So one pack would come by, and
just
and
1 second, Rick. Just 1 second. For you got to remember, we're an audio thing here now. So what you were just doing is you're holding up your tripod and moving it all over the place with both arms, like you're getting a workout to try and get these shots. Yeah,
and it's very stressful. I can't emphasize how stressful.
Yeah,
because you can't lose your focus.
Yeah. And how are you clicking your shutter on those?
Well, I'm using autofocus where you hold down the shutter halfway, so it's always focusing on. And I had a camera that was known as the fastest focusing camera. I was using the fastest focusing lens, which is 300 millimeter in the 2.8 aperture. But I would add an extender, 1.4 extender, so it made it to a 4.0 aperture. So,
and I'm sure all of our photography friends are appreciating this information, so that
they know exactly, precisely what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it's a very certain, that certain tiny talent in the world of all vast photography. Right. It's a minute, unimportant talent, except when you're in that situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, being able to fast focus on cyclists, who gives a damn? I mean. Runaways, doing runaway shots. And the reason I'm good at that is because I'm able to frame and focus so quick from sports.
Yeah.
But that's it. Then my third assignment location was the chute where they come running in. It's called FOF, run or finish. Mm-hmm. And then they've got this going on, and where they're smiling big.
They got their arms up. They're coming in.
A couple hundred yards back, they might have been, sick, and about to quit. Yeah. But getting close, they just become a new person. So I would shoot them running in with that same lens, with that same extender. I would be getting them way far back. So they were lucky to have a guy with that long lens that knew what he was doing.
Yeah. And then they have that memory for life, because some of them, they're one and done people.
Right. But before that, I was known as doing the clock shot. So getting them as they come underneath the clock.
Mm-hmm.
So and that still is my specialty, is doing the clock shot.
Nice.
There's not too many races where they have a shoot with thousands of people with music blaring with Mike Riley saying, "You are an Ironman." Yeah.
So in the time that you've been working in photography, other than the fact that the whole thing has obviously gone digital and now you can shoot a burst and pick out your best of 80 photos, are there any other technological advances that have come along, maybe in the lenses or other technologies, where now you can get a shot that you would not have gotten before?
Well, of course, going film to digital, it took a little while, about 3 or 4 years. And so after about 2004 on, the digital trend did take a little bit more. There was more megapixels, faster focusing lenses, faster focusing bodies, and if you're a professional photographer, you need to use professional equipment. Very heavy bodies. The lenses are very heavy, and you put all of that together, and it's heavy. They haven't the big technological advances that everybody's waiting for is to make all this stuff lightweight.
What's your feelings on photoshopping photos?
Well, post-production, which would cover anything. And by the way, most people don't even use Photoshop. That's got to be an industry term that people. I use Lightroom and Photoshop only for. Photoshop is a very, very, very powerful tool. And it's the best tool. By now, after all my years, I'm really behind the curve, because by all this time, I should be much, much better at it. I'm going to have to be, because I'm going to be doing a lot more personal portraits of people.
And that's one of the things I wanted to get into as well. Is that what are you doing these days? Like what's your main source of income here? What's your work focus these days?
There's a Wikipedia page that's fixing to come out. Covers my experiences. I'm really excited about that. There's a book being written that is taking over 10 years too long. It's called Ultimate Attitude. I've got a contributor that's basically just he's starting to review and edit quotes that we need for the book. But the most important quotes are from the famous people. Famous to me is John Marino, or like David Spinney, a cyclist, Lance. I already know what Lance is going to put. He's going to put, "That guy's crazy." That's what he always says. But, do you know Rick Kent? Yeah, that guy's crazy.
So this book, what is it? What's the basis of it? Is it just a chronological life story of Rick Kent, or is it?
It's still up in the air. I want to make it where it's got some fictionist characters. I mean, if it's all the truth, then everything I've done from age 5 till now, people they just simply wouldn't believe it. It would come off as a made up story, most of it, because it wouldn't. The same person, like in high school or even college, and then later on RAAM, and then working at Apple and Dell, where I was making all that money. And one thing I've always had, a common thing, is I've always been like a top salesman kind of guy. My career in sales was, I dare say, way surpasses any accomplishments I have in sports. My goal is to be a public speaker full time, where that's all the money I depend on. But I'd like to spend more time back to speaking with people with MS. I get the most value, personal worth from that. Talking to people with MS, because they get MS, and it's not like Rick Kent where you start laughing almost. I'm more special. People turn into alcoholics, and I talked to this one guy, a football player guy. It was at a speech after a speech I'd given in Birmingham. I was in the bathroom washing my hands, and he was too, and he looked at me and he says, "I've got to tell you, after listening to your speech, I'm not going to go home and commit suicide now." He had it in his head he was going to go home and commit. He was a big guy. He was an athlete. He played football, and he wasn't going to be able to play football anymore. And I think it was a bit of an exaggeration on his part. I don't think he would have done that. But by him saying that, can you imagine how I felt? Yeah. And I cried a little bit. I mean, I teared up. Makes me want to tear up right now. No, but I'd like to be able to. I still am that way. I'm an ambassador. I always will be an MS ambassador. Steve King always introduced me at any event we did. He'd always introduce me as the MS ambassador. It's true,
right?
But I'm not an official MS ambassador, not paid.
Yeah. And the photography, you said that you're going to be doing some more portraits. What about the sports?
Unfortunately, I don't get asked to do too much photography anymore because I have MS, and people have the perception that I can't get around. So those opportunities have been wiped out by at least 80%.
We've covered a lot of topics here today, and obviously you have a wealth of knowledge to share with people. So what's the easiest way for people to reach out and contact you, Rick, if they want to get some more of this knowledge from you?
The easiest way is on Facebook. I'll spend an hour talking to just about anybody if they want to do RAAM.
Well, I know you certainly shared a lot of really good advice through our conversation today for the people to work with, and to throw at your invitation for them to further that conversation with you if they want to. I'm sure some people will be reaching out and looking for that advice on RAAM from someone like yourself who's done it, or Ultraman.
A lot of people already have my email, rkent@mac.com. So make sure you, in the subject line, you say what it's about. I get some pretty crazy emails that anything to do with mentoring or coaching, or it's not crazy.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah.
I look forward to helping.
To put that out there and give that back to your sports. Thank you very much for the time we spent today talking. This is probably the longest interview I've done on the podcast. So I appreciate all that time that you're willing to share, and thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
It's a pleasure and an honor to do it. Thanks. Thank you, Larry.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview, and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises. Now really, go subscribe now before you forget.